Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today I thought it would be appropriate to tackle one of my favorite comfort projects. For me, that is a pair of trousers. Now I know that does not seem like everyone's idea of a comfort project, but I have made so many pairs at this point. Nearly every pair in my closet I've made. So I sort of have a default way of doing their construction. Now this is by no means the only way to do it. This is just my standard. So we're going to be looking at putting in a zipper fly front as well as putting pockets into the side seams. These are both things that are not restricted only to dealing with trousers, especially when it comes to the pockets. Managing to put in a well-fitted pocket on a seam of a dress or a skirt or even honestly an existing garment is something that is incredibly useful. I know we all would like more pockets in our clothes, especially ones that we can choose how big they are and how functional they are. So this is really the method that I use for taking a pattern that doesn't have pockets drawn out, that doesn't have a fly front drawn out. Especially since I tend to work from historic men's tailoring manuals for my drafting, there's no details and no instructions for any of it. So I have to take that pattern every time and figure out what all the little pieces need to look like and how they need to go together. So I figured I would share that process with you, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel just a little bit more comfortable with the idea of making a pair of trousers. We're going to start off by patterning out the pocket bag. You're going to take the front pattern piece and draw out the side seam, making sure to mark where you want the opening of your pocket to be. I usually like mine to be about 5 or 6 inches, starting at about the waist. Then we're going to mark the pocket bag length. I usually like it to be about 11 inches longer than my waist, and the width from the hip, in my case about 6 inches. It will depend on the size you need your pocket bag to be and the size of your trousers as well. We're going to then mark out the center line vertically and the bottom line horizontally, making sure to add seam allowance as needed. And I like to draw a little curve down at that bottom corner just to keep lint from getting trapped in there and to interfere less with the side seam. Rather than drawing the second side, I simply cut out the first half, fold it over, and use that as my cut line. Next, take your front pattern piece again, laying it on the fabric. We're going to trace out the center front line this time, making sure to mark how far down the opening for your fly front needs to be. In my case, I based this off of my zipper, knowing that my zipper was 9 inches, and I made sure to draw the opening of my fly front, which is just 1/4 of an inch below where my zipper is going to end. I like the widths of my facings to be about 1.5 inches, so I will make sure that I draw that on, as well as draw the seam allowance around all of the edges. Down at the bottom, you'll want to curve the corner to finish it off. For this, you'll want to cut out 2 facings in your fabric, as well as 2 facings in your stiffer pocketing or lining material. One additional piece that I like to add, I take from a very small scrap of my fabric. This is going to essentially face that little part of your pocket that always seems to show. It never lies completely flat when it's over the hips, and so just a little bit of your pocketing can show, and if it's a very different color, that can sometimes be annoying. So I take a scrap just a couple inches wide, make sure that it is longer than my pocket opening by at least 1/2 inch top and bottom, and once I cut it to fit my pocketing, I will essentially zigzag stitch and applique that little scrap on, so that way if the pocket does open just slightly, you'll see just more of your garment fabric. Now for the fly front, we're going to work with 2 different pieces. The first is sort of an extension which goes underneath. In my case, I am doing a left over right style of fly front. So we're going to start with that extension, and then the other piece is simply flat lined and will be the facing for the left side. Once we've stitched the fronts together from the opening down, we're going to iron back a very small seam allowance for the right underside. This will essentially offset the zipper so it's not directly on the center seam and will allow you to hide it just a little bit more easily. In my case, I used a 1/2 inch seam allowance for my pair of trousers, and I only ironed back 1/4 inch. This is going to get top stitched over both the zipper and that underlaying extension. My particular style of trousers does not have a waistband, so I've gone ahead and finished off the top of my extension piece already. In order to secure the other side of the zipper, we're going to want to stitch this only through that facing, not through any of the layers of the underside, or for that matter, through the exterior layer of the trousers. So I like to lay things flat on my table, go ahead and pin through all of the upper layers, and then I will essentially work from the interior, moving the pins, so that way I am only pinned through the zipper and that front facing. Now, I personally feel that the right over left versus left over right that differentiates whether it's worn by a man or a woman as very much a pointless concept, because the right versus left idea was created as a way to differentiate between men's and women's garments and has really only been around for about 100 years. The whole myth of women had it done the other way because maids dressed them is completely not true, because if a woman had a maid to dress her, then likely the men of the house also had valets to dress them. So it is entirely just a way to differentiate between men's and women's clothing, which developed in the early 20th century as men's and women's clothing started to look a little bit more similar. Therefore, I really don't think it matters which side you have your fasteners on. I think this is far more a matter of what side you're comfortable with, and usually for people that is either what they are most familiar with or what dominant hand they have. For inserting the pockets, you're going to go ahead and stitch the side of the pocketing that does not have the applique piece to your front of your trousers, just where the pocket opening is. Above this, if you have no waistband, and below this, you'll go ahead and stitch the pocketing layers together. backs will be attached to the pocketing in the same way, just stitching at that opening. This should be the side with the applique piece, and above and below that, you'll simply stitch the fronts to the backs along the side seams.